and age-reversing health. It's all coming right up on Things That Matter. Now, please welcome your host, Carl Krebs. Welcome to Things That Matter.
Good evening and welcome to Things That Matter. And I truly do want to thank you for joining us. For the next 90 minutes, we're going to be talking about things that matter. In our first 30 minutes, we're going to talk about farm to market with our ever knowledgeable and well-versed friend, Harry Siemens, who is an expert on all things that relate to producers. In our second segment that starts right after that, we're going to get into age-reversing health, and we've got some important announcements and a discussion about the natural health products that are under siege in Canada. And our third segment is devoted to caring for kids. How can we better care for kids? I want to share some valuable information on a chat group that was developed a couple of years ago. So hang with us, get a drink, settle in for the next 90 minutes, and join us to talk about things that matter. Here's the word from yours truly.
Hello, and thank you for your time. When I launched the Things That Matter Facebook group in 2018, my dream was to create a space where we could speak openly about the values that shape us, values that cross cultures, denominations, and generations. These principles of morality, integrity, and freedom are gifts from our Creator, passed down to guide us and protect us. Since then, our journey has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. In 2021, we became a nonprofit organization. And in 2022, we stood together during the trucker convoy, reporting truth in the face of misinformation. This year, we've taken a new step forward, launching the Things That Matter podcast and amplifying our message and mission. But now we need your help. Studio time, production costs, and the technology required to produce high-quality episodes come with significant expenses. We've reached a point where self-funding can no longer sustain our vision. That's why we're asking for your support. By partnering with us as a sponsor, whether as a business owner or a private individual, you'll help us continue spreading the truth and hope. As a registered nonprofit, we are committed to transparency and accountability in everything we do. Your contribution, no matter the size, will help us to expand our reach to new audiences, cover essential production and technology costs, and shine the light of truth in an increasingly dark world. We have developed a sponsorship program that we believe will return value to you for your financial support. And if financial support isn't possible, you can still help us by liking and sharing our content to spread the message far and wide. We believe this calling is bigger than any one of us, and together we can make a lasting impact. Let's be the salt and the light in this world, preserving the values that make life meaningful. For more information on how to partner with us, go to our website, thingsthatmatter.ca, or email us at info@thingsthatmatter.ca. Thank you for standing with us to be a part of something bigger. Let's build a future rooted in truth, freedom, and integrity. Thank you for your support. God bless you and your loved ones.
Good evening and welcome to Farm to Market. Before I bring my co-host Harry Siemens onto the show, I want to thank you truly for your support and for watching what we do and liking and sharing it. That's what we're here to talk about, important things that matter. In this first segment, Farm to Market, I'm bringing Harry Siemens onto the podcast right now. Harry, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing okay. We've got winter almost, but you know what? In about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, the daylight hours are going to get longer. So you got to look at it from a real positive standpoint.
And you know, Canadians, we have to be optimistic. You know, it's like when we get those minus 30 days and then all of a sudden the weatherman says it's moving up to minus 15. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Minus 15.
You bet.
So, Harry, what's going on with our producers? You're always got your ear to the ground. You're always sniffing out things. You're in so many different podcasts and interviews. What's going on out in the producers market that's concerning producers right now today? What's the breaking news out there?
Well, the grain farmers, they've obviously, lost some profit because the grain prices have come down from where they were a year and a half to 2 years ago. So that's a challenge. We've got some rumors or some people talking about we could see some more strikes on the West Coast, and so that's a concern about movement of grain. I mean, if we can't, as an exporting nation, 75-80% of our produce goes to an export market, it's got to move. Truck, grain cart from the field to the truck to the big Super B, onto the train and out to West Coast or whatever coast they're going. So that's a concern. But at the same time, we've gone into this fall, we've got snow cover in a large part of it, not a very heavy snow cover, but we had a wet soil. It rained before it snowed when it was not even freezing. So we got a wet soil that's frozen. You know what? That's good going into fall. We're not going to see the dust blowing. If there's going to be winds, it'll be the snow blowing if there's snow. So that's another positive scene. But, there was, and again, this is also a positive. Most viewers and listeners may not know what porcine epidemic diarrhea virus is.
Can you say that again? That sounds like a mouthful, my friend. Say it again.
Porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. Short is PED.
Well, I'm going to tell you, just by the way it sounds, I don't want to come anywhere close to getting that, Harry. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, it's not, that humans do not get it, but pigs do. And back in 21, 22, we had probably close to 200 barns, a lot of them in southeastern Manitoba. In fact, most of them, where they broke with this crazy, horrible virus. Diarrhea, absolutely. These little piglets, they poop themselves to death, if I may say that. And it can happen in 18 hours. And then the entire barn has to be cleaned out, pigs gone, and then you have to wash it down, and you lose at least one cycle, maybe two. 6 months is already one cycle. So the Manitoba Pork Council has worked really hard in developing the defense, if you want to call it that, to set up biosecurity so that we do not get it. Well, normally we would have already had a bunch. This week, late last week, we had the first barn that broke. And when I talked to Cam Dahl, the manager of Manitoba Pork, and I asked him, I says, can you respond to this? Because I kind of got it, from one of my sources on WhatsApp. I got that this had actually happened. And it's not a secret. But at the same time, he responded and said, you know what? We're so happy that it took till December for us to have the first barn that would break in it, because that's been the real challenge. So
okay, so to put it into perspective, Harry, it does happen. It's not like mad cow syndrome or something like that, where this is going to potentially shut down pork exports. Is that right? We want to make sure that the pork industry, that $2.5 billion industry in Manitoba, is still going to be alive and functioning. So this is something that is expected, and you've had your first outbreak, correct?
First outbreak this year.
Yes.
2021, we had 200 barns. Millions and millions. Not only is it a horrible economic loss, but for the hog workers, I talked to farm boss managers who, where they had to clean up these piglets, right? Mm-hmm. And so So you're right. It doesn't affect our export qualities at all. The only thing it affects is the farmer whose barn has to get cleaned up. He loses those pigs, he loses those weanlings, and he loses maybe one cycle to two cycles of income, which is like,
Right. There's in the producer market and the hog producer market, are they covered for such incidents the way
no.
farmers are with crop loss insurance?
Not at all. No, there's a little bit of so that's why the industry has taken Manitoba right now is way ahead. In the U.S., it initially came from the United States, and it's transported by trucks, truck drivers, whoever moves around. It always grabs onto something if it's around.
Okay.
So you have to have total. And here's one example, and I just want to use this example. On October 6th, I went into a hog barn at Blue Clay Colony at Arnaud, Manitoba. Well, guess what? I had to drive to the farmer's house. That's where he picked me up with his vehicle. We drove to the barn, and then he showed me the total layout. He says, Harry, this is on this side of production. You can do what you want here, but here's the line. And from here on, if you want to get into that pig barn, you got to disinfect your phone. You got to move 1 foot at a time over a half wall, leave the shoe over here, put on a different shoe, take a shower, put on their clothes, and then I can go into the barn. And when I come back, I've got to do the same thing all over again. So,
you know what? I'm familiar with that actually, because when I was in commodity hauling, they had all the signs up, do not enter, do not come in.
Totally.
And you watch them with their separate garments, their separate boots. Pigs are very, very susceptible to disease. That's been known forever. So when it hits hard, and the finances are hit hard too. So this is actually, according to Cam Dahl, who was on our show last week, we're going to have him on again after Mr. Trump is sworn in to see what's going on. But, I guess he's thankful that it took till now to have the first outbreak of this, correct?
Right. And the other one that could be a real challenge, and we say if, is the African swine fever. African swine fever. That's what they're all getting ready for, because that's the one. If we have one barn with African swine fever, that shuts down the entire industry. We cannot.
Bad news.
One piece of pork, one pig, nothing.
That is very much like the mad cow thing that shuts down the whole export, where the trucks are stopped at the border and nothing's getting out. I want to move into the dairy farmers. You were at an AGM last week. Give us a brief update what's going on in that market, something that pertains to the consumer out there that they need to know. And then I want to move into our third segment, which I think is going to be interesting for our listeners.
Well, I was actually at the first day of the Dairy Farmers of Manitoba AGM yesterday. The second day, of course, is today, and it winds up tomorrow. But, number one, their keynote speaker yesterday was about artificial intelligence, AI, and how dairy farmers are using it, how we can use it more, how to understand it, and become the leader in the world about being first and foremost with these kinds of things. I mean, a lot of farmers are already using it. I mean, GPS is AI, all of that. It's, there's so much AI involved in everything we do. People don't understand it. The key thing is for us to not give up our intelligence. And that was we had a great speaker, and that's what she said, make sure you understand. So that's number one. David Weens, who's a dairy farmer, probably 230 cows up at Grunthal, Manitoba, together with his brother Charles. David is the chair of the Dairy Farmers of Canada. So I had a chance to visit with David. We've been good friends for many, many years, and I'm going to make more reference to him on the next subject. But at the same time, David told me in an interview that the black cow, is the symbol, is the brand of the dairy products in Canada. And right now, I think he said something about 90, they have almost perfect recognition of the dairy brand, the Canadian dairy. And something he told me, he says, we already are getting up to 18% imports from other countries through trade agreements. And we're going to be seeing some more trade agreements, with Trump and who knows. So that brand that Canadian consumers recognize as the dairy product grown here, produced in Canada, is very, very important. But he made reference to a number of the trade deals. Obviously, he says we're going to be working closely with the federal government, they hope, and they're going to be able to work together so that, like he put it, he says, so that we don't get a real negative fallout from when President Trump takes office and they start to renegotiate the trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States.
Okay. So actually, you mentioned trade agreements that are already in effect. So perhaps there's a little bit of a false flag on the fact that Trump is talking about the restriction of American dairy products into Canada. Is that correct? We have a lot of trade agreements with outside countries already. So I think our market is in a good shape to receive even more and do more trade agreements, correct?
Yes, I mean, obviously the whole supply management works on the basis that they know what the supply is and they know what the demand is, right? I mean, they supply according to the demand. If that supply comes from outside the border, that means that it changes things for the Canadian dairy producer. That's their concern. I mean, that's the discussion we've had with the trade bills, even within Ottawa right now. See, 282, I believe it is. Where there's somebody that wants Quebec, especially. Quebec is so very dependent on supply management, and so they want to make sure that any trade agreements, we take supply management off the table. Well, it's now in the Senate. I haven't heard lately whether it's going to actually get passed where they can take that supply management off the table. The rest of agriculture, you can watch it with what you're going to do, but don't tell them ahead of time that you can't do anything with supply management. You're already, giving your whole ball of wax before we even start.
Yeah, I think we need to play our cards a little closer to the vest, even in what there was rumors that, I just can't understand this guy the way he thinks. Trudeau is already saying, well, we're looking at retaliatory tariffs. Seriously? You want to go down that path with Trump? Do you really want to take him on? You better, mind your P's and Q's, play your cards closer to your vest. If you have to do it, if you feel you have to do it, then do it. But for goodness sakes, let's not put everything out on the laundry line and have nothing left in our backup pocket. So, Harry, I want to talk about succession planning, and I want you to give a brief intro, and then I want to play a little bit of a video of an interview that you did with a lady. So, give us the intro to the topic and the credentials of this lady that you interviewed.
Well, Elaine Fraze is from Boissevain. She farms with her husband, but she's a farm family coach. She really works with, and she speaks all over the world. I've known Elaine for many years, but her claim to fame initially has to do with succession planning. Why? She asked me when I did that interview, he says, what's the price of land in Winkler? So any farm that has 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres, before you know it, you've got values in the millions. And how are you going to get that farm if you want somebody else to take it over? How are you going to get it to the next son or the next generation daughter? So that's really what she does. I've followed her for many years on that topic. But the reason I went to her was because I had interviewed two young farm couples. They were both dairy farmers. And then I asked them at the end, just because, I said, do you have a succession plan? Are you talking succession planning? And these couples were not 40 years old. And both of the couples said, absolutely, we are. In fact, the one case, the dad had already pulled back. So, and at the dairy meeting yesterday, we had three farmers. Right at the end, the last session was a panel of three farmers talking about their succession plan. Each one was different, but each one had a plan where dad had already backed off the next generation. And this one fella, probably 40 some years old, is, kids are, 7 and 8 years old. We're already thinking, how are we going to involve them if they want to be farming down the road? So, this one farm yesterday, and I found initially when dad said, I want to be a missionary in Ukraine. And that was 2001. He said, you guys, they took off. And he gave everything over to the families. As long as he said they would have money to live, right? Well, then it was 10 million. Now, three brothers, years later, also wanted to come in. Now they're talking 100 million.
All right.
So how does that all happen?
Let's play a clip from this video because I think it sets a good stage here. 1 second here. Let's start again here. Just a second here. All right. Now we're here. Now we want to go here, and we want to do this. And let's start the play button here. Oh, 1 second here. My fault. We have to get the sound up.
Two young farming couples. And my question to each one of them at the end was, what about succession planning? And both of them were totally into it. Like they were really good. And I'll just, back in 1997, I did a story with Wientz Dairy out of Grunthal. David Wientz is now chair of the Dairy Farmers of Canada.
Oh, good. Yes.
Their father had a major heart attack, and they owned a dairy. They had no will, no nothing, but he didn't die. He was able to come back to the farm, but immediately he told them, you know what? If I had died, where would the dairy farm have been?
Right.
So I did the article with them in 1997 about how they did it, and then several years later, he passed away suddenly. And then I went back and I did a follow-up. And I said, did your succession plan work? And they said, oh, thank God. It worked far better than we had ever anticipated. So tell me, are farmers nowadays, are they getting more serious earlier as far as the succession planning is concerned?
Well, I just did a podcast with a fellow from Australia named Ben Law called The Agri-Coach. And he's a financial planner who's turned into a coach in Australia. And his sweet spot, Harry, is working with farmers between the ages of 40 and 55, because he is in that zone of doing preventative and proactive succession planning. And we like to use the word now in Canada, we use more often the word transition. But the case is, in fact, that younger farmers want to drive the succession transition planning process because younger farmers come back from ag school, men and women, they're operators and they're laborers, but they really want to get clarity on certainty of their equity. And so if you give me a 40-year-old farmer with a 62-year-old father and mom who have no written agreements as to how the ownership is going to start shifting around or assets are going to start moving, and there's no plan for the younger generation to get equity at the age of 40, these young farmers are highly frustrated. And so they're the ones that reach out to me and say, Elaine, how do we get everybody to the table? Now, the older farmers typically have a little bit of conflict avoidance fear, or a lot. So they don't want to be like Mr. Wientz the first time when he had his heart attack and would have left his family in chaos. But we don't want to have health scares like cancer, strokes, and heart attacks be the driver of good planning. So it's convincing the older farmers that getting to the table, that conflict is not bad. And so in our coaching team now at Farm Family Coach, we use a tool called the conflict dynamic profile. which people can do online, and it helps them find out their positive conflict behaviors, things like expressing emotion. Dad, I'm really frustrated. I have a wife and young children now. I need to grow something that's mine. When can we move some of this equity? Mom, you're looking really tired. I need to be close to the dairy cows. When are you and Dad ready to switch houses or move off the main yard? Right? So it's about creating solution and reaching out and adapting, Harry. And what I've just mentioned to you are very positive conflict behaviors. And once people start to understand that conflict is good and it can be respectful to get clarity of expectations and certainty of timelines and agreements, then you can get a transition plan put into action.
Sorry about that. I didn't want any background noise. So I could have gone further into that interview. It's very good. But in the 3 minutes that we've got left here, kind of wrap it up. And do we still have farmers and young farmers out there that have not addressed this matter? Is this still a really big concern?
It's far bigger than we ever want to admit. You know, there's more and more people talking. There's more people talking at a younger age. As I mentioned to you before, we had 3 farmers yesterday, and I don't think any of them was 50 years old. And so they were all already planning, and they were already planning on how they would get out, you know, how they could bring their young, but that's not the norm. I mean, Elaine says there's a lot of work, but, you know, I remember sitting at one of her topic where she discussed this, and I'm sitting with a couple, and the couple had moved off the farm so the boy could farm. Well, guess what they did? They sold the combine so they could build a house. You know, and now the boy didn't have a combine, and there's a daughter off the farm say, "No, you're not taking any of the more money. You know, you can buy your own combine." And
well, later in the interview, I just want to jump ahead here. You talk about the fact that some of the producers, the older farmers, so to speak, are find themselves having put everything into the farm and have amassed debt that in their 60s they didn't think they'd ever have. How do you transition out of that? Because the older farmer's got everything in there. How does he pull his equity out? What is he going to live on? Like you said, one guy sold his combine. Well, that's like selling your hammer when you're a carpenter. Good luck.
Right, totally. You know, and that's why they're working with young, you know, the couples younger and younger. Not only is there, that they need equity to live, but at the same time, what about the taxes that are going to have to be paid? You know, that's the other thing, you know, that they're planning for taxes. You know, the things that I heard, and I'm going to read, and in fact, maybe one of those guys we could get on from those young farmers on a future program, because I think right now, aside from all these other things that we've talked about, succession planning is a real key that I think I would like to touch on from time to time, just because, as I said earlier, I interviewed those 2 young couples and I asked them just out of curiosity, are you guys already, oh man, he says, we're already thinking about how we're going to get off, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
But I can, someday I'll tell you the story about my father, how he did it. Because
there's a few things I want to follow up on. We've put a lot of irons in the fire here, and I always like to revisit that so that we sort of get, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story.
You bet.
But we've got just a few seconds here. What are you working on for the podcast coming up? Because there's some exciting stuff, and I'm going to just tip you off to the one that you talked about in the area of natural resources. Can you give us? We only got a few seconds here, but Greg Olson.
Rob Olson, yeah.
Olson, thank you.
I've got a message out to him. I actually invited him on today, but he never responded. So we're going to get him back. But at the same time, Keystone Ag Producers, and I just got the tail end of the presentation, or she answered the question, the president, yesterday, and they're also already wanting to be at the table. And then she talked about the the municipality association. They want to be at the table. Yeah, but I never got to hear which table. You know, there's a bunch of tables, right? The table that Manitoba Wildlife Federation wants them to be at is with the government. They want to be there with the Indigenous people discussing it and negotiating, not from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking inside.
All right. And you know what? May I say it for you? And that's Seaman says.
Somewhere, sometime, somehow, I'll see you again.
All right. Thank you, Harry. Our time is up. We'll see you again here real soon. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, that ends our farm to market segment, the first 30 minutes of 90.